Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about American politics. Uh, it American politics. We're going to talk about June 27th, 2024, the catastrophe debate between President Biden and President Donald Trump, and just the astonishing fallout of this. Uh, I am in love with language, and because I think language is what cuts through the bullpucky, just and gets to the raw meat of it. Like where are we at? Like it cuts through the fog and shows the truth, right? Like, and boy, oh boy, are we seeing, in my humble opinion, truth being very specifically stated by the people who are most incented to say the lie, right? Like, who gain the most from the lie, right? Like, so that's just in my humble opinion. Here we go. Okay, let me explain this, right? So what the real shocking part of this is that the Democrats are going, oh my gosh, President Joseph Biden can't run again. That's the astonishing part that we're seeing. And the language surrounding this is astounding. It's a shocker. Like, it's just a shocker. So let me walk you to where we've arrived. Okay, hand in hand, right? So podcasts are the most liberal format that has ever been created. Now, why is that? Well, podcasts are only listened to by wealthy, highly educated coastal elites. That's the only. You're not going to go to Kentucky and go, hey grandma, I'd like some sweet tea. What's your favorite podcast? And she's like, pod what now? And 15 years later, like, I think we're coming up on 20 years that podcasts have been around, and there are literally huge swaths of the entire country that have never listened to a podcast. Now, why is that? Because you have to listen on a podcatcher. Like, you have to listen on an RSS aggregator. You understand what I'm saying? Like, this is astounding, right? Like, and so only the most wealthy, liberal, coastal elites ever even listen to podcasts, which means that podcasts are outrageously more liberal than any other format, any other media format, literally any other media format. It is the most liberal media format that has ever existed, right? Now, let's talk about a podcast. Pod Save America. Pod Save America is an absolute oiled, efficient spin machine for Joseph Biden, right? It is, and they've been doing nothing but just like spin for Joseph Biden, in my opinion, for every day of his they've been spinning for him as long as they possibly could. And these guys are hyper dyed-in-the-wool liberals on a hyper dyed-in-the-wool liberal format, right? John Favreau, the founder of Pod Save America, arguably the most liberal podcast on the most liberal media format ever invented, right? These are his words. The panic is real. It is happening. The panic is real. It is happening. The panic is real. It is happening. I love this. I love this statement. It is, and he said this directly after watching Joseph Biden. And so often you hear now's not the time to panic. Well, when is, right? And finally, in my humble opinion, John Favreau finally said it. He's like, now is the time to panic. The panic is real. It's happening, right? Now, what does he mean by that? In my humble opinion, there's so much. This is a freighted statement. It's freighted, right? What does he mean? He's like, it's all over, folks. It's all over, right? This is the day that spin dies, right? And also, he's like, there's a ton of institutions that are going to be held accountable for what the entire country just saw. What did we see? In the words of Kate Riga, right, from the John Marshall podcast, a senile disaster, right? She said that that President Biden was a senile disaster. That is astonishing, according to Hark, right? That is astounding. That is astounding language. And again, This is not some far right. This isn't even a right commentator. This is a very liberal commentator saying President Biden, who showed up on June 27th, 2024, was a senile disaster. And that's important because I would never say about the president, he's a senile disaster, right? But the moment I heard it, I'm like, oh my gosh. Yep, I didn't have the cruelty or the, wherewithal to say that, but boy, is that true. You're like, yeah, that fits in the truth box, doesn't it? It fits in the truth box, right? Senile disaster, right? But here's the kicker, right? Like, you're like, okay, yeah, so we all know, we all just saw it. We all agree with Kate Riga that President Biden is a senile disaster. But let's go back to John Favreau, right? He said the panic is real. Why should we be panicking right now? Why should we be hyperventilating right now? Why should we be balling up in a fetal position right now? Because the panic is real. It's happening. What is happening? Realization that the media tricked us, that they carefully worked in tandem with the Democrat Party and the White House to carefully lie for years, and that it's quite possible, right, in my humble opinion, that that Joseph Biden was never president, that he never made a single decision, right? We know, right? Like we know he can't even speak reliable sentences. And we've been saying this for months and years, and people are like, no, you're just not seeing the right context. And everybody's like, hey man, Kate Riga's right. He's a senile disaster. He cannot string together even a single sentence. Even a single sentence. He cannot reliably complete sentences, right? And you can't lie to us anymore. You're gaslighting on the obvious, right? And that means that a bunch of institutions are on the hook for institutional, long-term lying to the American public, right? Telling the American public, yeah, I know you're saying his age is a major problem and that he has no business with the nuclear codes, but you're wrong. And now we're like, no, we were never wrong. We were always right. You will find me right here 5 years ago saying this is untenable. This is unwise. This is not going to work. And I get to collect my I done told you check today. I done told you, right? Kate Riga's right. Senile disaster, right? John Favreau is right. The panic is real. It's happening, right? Like, you have just found out that for the last 4 years, you never had a president. You never had a president in the U.S. So who was ruling? And then that's why we're panicking, because we're like, a dark cabal of shadowy figures in a star chamber? Like, that could be the only answer, right? It's not anything else, because we're all positive that guy who you would not trust to order a pizza certainly wasn't ruling the U.S. So who was? Right? And so we're here. Like, these are John Favreau's words, man. We are here. We are here. We are here. The panic, just exactly as Pod Save America's brilliant, right? John Favreau perfectly summed up. The panic is real. It's happening. Yes, it's happening. We're all realizing right now that we never had a president for the last 4 years. It's very clear now that Joseph Biden was not making any presidential decisions. So who was? In my humble opinion, clearly a dark cabal of shadowy characters sitting in a star chamber. Clear as day. In my humble opinion. Every single word you just heard is my humble opinion. The important part is when you remember that John Favreau said, the panic is real. It's happening. And then you send your content. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a fetch millennium.